Alright everyone, as promised from last time, we are going to do our second match versus Alice. This is my Biotech, my vegan Biotech shall we say, against Alice's Andromeda deck. Alright, just a reminder, since we are moving on with Nisei developments, this was still with the old card pool, which means the revised core set number 2, as well as the previous most wanted list, the one without paperclip on it. Alright. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, I'm just going to do a very standard opening here because I have Ice, I have Hedge Fund, so it's Ice, Ice, Hedge Fund here. Tapestry was in my opening hand, so that makes good R&D Ice. Tapestry really only in my deck to fulfill the 6 HB cards needed for Jeeves Alliance, so it really only belongs on R&D, and it does a really good work of preventing single accesses netting agendas. Now, let's see what my opponent does here with their very wonderful 9-card hand start. That's that's a lot of cards. I see a Sure Gamble in there, so a lot of mileage going to come out from my opponent as they play Sure Gamble, Data Sucker, and Ormakua. So this is pressure right out the gate from turn 1. Even though my opponent's not 419, so they don't get the free expose, Ormakua is still a very big threat against this Biotech deck, because this is not this is a rush deck. This is not a deck I want to play slow by icing up archives, but against Ormakua and Data Sucker, I will soon realize that I have to. I'm not sure what that card is, I forgot, but it's something that allows my opponent to make a run on archives, thereby gaining a Data Sucker counter and an Ormakua. Probably a Dirty Laundry here, but I don't think the money adds up, so I'm not very sure, sorry about that, but that's not really relevant for now. All you need to know is that I need to deal with this Ormakua Data Sucker threat, and I decide to install a bunch of cards in the remote instead of icing up archives. Now this could be a mistake. I don't think it is though, because the remote ice that I put down was actually Thimble Rig, which would not have stopped my opponent. The first server they would poke would naturally be archives once they do feel like running, so having Thimble Rig on archives isn't very good, since it's easily broken by Ormakua. Right, I would much rather put the Thimble Rig on the remote where it does its work, allowing me to actually threaten pushing out some agendas. Now my opponent on their turn plays Bankroll, plays Security Testing, plays Crowdfunding, which is the card that has 3 credit counters on it next to the Security Testing, and then for the last click they run Archives. This allows them to get another Data Sucker counter and another Ormakua counter. Ormakua, by the way, is the middle card in the front row between Bankroll and Data Sucker. Now, I play an IPO here to get up some money. The item in my remote is actually a viral weaponization, but because my opponent basically played a bunch of cards last turn, it wasn't really worth it for me to fire off the viral weaponization against my opponent who didn't have a lot of cards in hand. So I was going to incubate it in there for one more turn, make my opponent think it's an upgrade, and this allows me to ruse them into playing their falsified credentials on the remote, as you will soon see. First, they ran Archives for the Security Testing. Then they drew up, and then they played falsified credentials on remote naming upgrade, which is a very smart move from Alice. 9 out of 10 times this will be an upgrade, but in this scenario, I was just incubating the agenda there, finding a right moment to fire it off. So I'm gonna show the viral weaponization there. Now the curious thing is that my opponent did not play an employee strike here. They had a strike in their hand, but they chose to draw for the last click. Not really respecting my greenhouse into viral weaponization threat, so I'm gonna happily fire off my greenhouse right here. My opponent knows there's an agenda in the remote, so better get it out of the way, get my 2 points scored up. It doesn't really feel good using greenhouse this early on in the game, as it neuters my ID ability for the rest of the game, but at least I'm not giving my opponent the 2 points. And you can see here my opponent actually ditches double employee strike, so I did feel like my opponent should have played the strike last turn, but I think they were afraid of the flatline. You saw they only had 3 cards in hand. If they played the strike, they would have been down to 1 card instead. That would have opened up the possibility of Neuro EMP flatline. So in retrospect, I think what Alice did was right, given that she didn't know much about my deck list. On to the runner's turn, my opponent installs Earthrise after taking 3 draws to put themselves out of flatline range, and this is really the only thing that is deterring Alice from running early on here. Otherwise, every single turn my opponent would definitely be running Archives for Security Testing. Mad value, 3 credits a turn between Bankroll and Security Testing. as well as all the data sucker counters. So yeah, my opponent's just playing around the flat line for the most part right now, but I can't really threaten that anymore. So I'm going to start distracting them by putting 2 cards out in the remote, one in the ice remote and a naked Jeeves in the second remote. My opponent uses up their crowdfunding, which goes in the bin and gets their Earthrise draw. Click 1 is going to be running the remote here. There's no reason for my opponent not to, given that they have at least 3 cards in hand. A snare is a non-issue, and it's always good to check cards, and it's gaining my opponent a lot of mileage since they're getting bankroll money and possibly Omakua counters anyway. So they see the G's model Bioroids on the naked server, and it makes perfect sense for them not to trash it, even though I could potentially res Jeeves and then score the Nisei from my remote. That's always a possibility. My opponent would rather get the Omakua counter, this they'll get if they don't trash the Jeeves, and get the bankroll money, of course. Now they run my Thimble-Rig, which they easily break, so this is why I didn't put the Nisei in my remote. It's way too vulnerable against a Thimble-Rig, and my opponent correctly identifies that this could be a 4-2 agenda I'm trying to push here, which is why they are forced to run the remote. Instead, they just see a Rashida, which they trash. My opponent's coming out ahead in this exchange because it's free to trash. Bankroll gets 1 credit, and they trash using one of their real credits. But more importantly, it denies me the Rashida that I so badly need. So my ice is really not looking good. I haven't drawn any quality ice, and a Nancy on the remote would be far more damaging to my opponent than a Thimble-Rig. Now that I see it, not really either, right? Because of the number of virus counters they have amassed between Omakua and Data Sucker, I can't even keep them out of the remote even with an Anansi. And this is where you see my deck just completely falls apart to Omakua and run-based decks, because they're just making so much money and Omakua counters while running. So their third click is to sec test archives, and the last click is to run archives for real to see what's in my archives, get an Omakua counter. Because they spend all 4 clicks of this turn running, run Jeeves, run Thimble-Rig, and run archives twice, they get the crowdfunding back from their bin, and that's going to give them 3 credits and a card over the course of the next few turns. Again, this is where I'm really struggling, right? Normally I would just ignore icing archives, maybe even ignore icing HQ for that matter, simply because I need to push out my agendas quickly, and I can only do so if all my eyes are on the remote. I can't do that against run-based decks because I have to respect diversion of funds, and even when I do, the naked archives is still going to cost me a lot of credits. You see, my opponent has so many counters on their cards right now, and even though I have ice archives now, they can still run my Jeeves, right? The Jeeves is out there in the open, and I don't have ice to ice it. So Alice will play Sure Gamble here. Now here my opponent runs my remote click 2. As you can see, I'm speeding up the video because there's a lot of downtime, a lot of thinking, and not a lot of action. So they're going to break my Thimble-Rig, and at this point I'm going to consider whether I want to swap the Thimble-Rig with another ice. I wanted to here. I don't remember why exactly. I think I was trying to position myself better, but as you'll soon see, this is kind of irrelevant. On the 3rd and 4th click, my opponent decides to be evil and play a Diversion of Funds. Yep, the alt art card you see there is Diversion of Funds. It's the Poor Man's Siphon, but Poor Man's Siphon is pretty good when your opponent doesn't really have a solution for it. Now, I had Anansi on HQ. I chose not to rest the Anansi here because doing so would not deny my opponent any diversion credits, while it would put me down at 0 credits, which is, well, not the worst. I guess in retrospect what I should have done was to res the Anansi and res the G's model Bioroids, I guess. Now the reason I didn't want to do that was because on my turn I wanted to res the Jeeves and then purge virus counters. So that would give me mileage because purging with Jeeves online will give me an extra click. So now I'm on 6 credits. But what I really want to do here is to maintain a decent credit level, because had I res the Anansi on HQ and then purge, my opponent would simply run rampant on archives or R&D. Yeah, that's because I wouldn't have enough credits to threaten any meaningful ice on those servers. In the end, it didn't really matter because all my opponent did was to run my Jeeves 3 times, getting 2 bankroll money each time and getting an Omakua counter for each Jeeves run. So as you can see here, the naked Jeeves, while enabling me to purge and get some mileage out of it, is also hindering me because it's giving my opponent a very easy target for bankroll runs. Now I'm trying to ice up my remote desperately so that I can actually get something done on my remote, but my opponent starts unloading their first bankroll, and it looks like this is going to be a lost cause. They have a boatload of credits, and they just spent a little fraction of it to install a miner. Now this is the super efficient code gate breaker that is going to slice through basically all the taxing ice in my deck, except for the Anansi. This is the one ice my opponent doesn't have a good solution for. So I'm very happy to have it on HQ. Protecting me against emergency shutdown and more diversion of funds. There are armor cores on 3 counters, so they can't actually break the Anansi. So I actually get to do Anansi shenanigans here. I look at the top 5 cards of my deck. I choose not to draw. My opponent takes some damage. I'm gonna do some damage here, discarding a bankroll, their third bankroll. Damaging the Fem from their hand, as well as some other irrelevant cards. So yeah, Fem is actually quite a big deal for my opponent because, as it turns out, that is basically their only sentry breaker. So they don't actually have a solution to Anansi other than Armor Cooler. So very interesting there. Not that I know it when I was playing the game, but this will explain a lot about why my opponent is taking certain actions. So over to my turn, it's going to be triple click for credits with Jeeves, and on my last click, probably draw a card here. Okay, and then it's back over to my opponent, who then runs Jeeves a bunch. Yes, they run Jeeves a bunch, and my response to that was credit hedge fund IPO. So over back to my turn, they start running again. This time they run into my HQ because Armor Core is now loaded with 5 virus counters, so they can run HQ, steal the viral weaponization from my hand, and now they are going to run my HQ again, trashing a Marcus Batty. They then run R&D here, and at this point I can't really be bothered to res the R&D ice, or can I? It's a tapestry, it's not gonna do much. If anything, resing the tapestry means that my opponent can break it with a miner, which denies me 1 credit. So this is where I really don't want to be resing code gates to enable my opponent's Amina. Very oppressive breaker, of course, very expensive to install, but my opponent, having gotten such a huge windfall off the first bankroll, was able to install Amina with ease, and now is really threatening, you know, all my servers. You can see that the card next to their security testing is a turning wheel. That all-out card there with 2 counters on it. So yeah, my opponent has been running centrals a lot, getting turning wheel counters, and now I'm going to draw into the rest of their deck with Earthrise Hotel. So there's going to be a huge inevitability in this game. My opponent's inevitably going to get win the game just off turning wheel accesses. So right now I can only tread water by purging virus counters every turn with Jeeves out, but am I really treading water here? Not very sure. My opponent really is just able to run the Jeeves every single turn, as you see here them doing here. They are loading up their Armor Core. So they are running my Jeeves a bunch of times. This gives them bankroll money, this gives them Paragon Trigger, and this gives them crowdfunding trigger. They are able to install crowdfunding from their bin because they made a bunch of runs this turn. Actually no, I think that crowdfunding was from their hand. So my bad, but you can see the amount of mileage my opponent is getting even without the data sucker trigger, because Jeeves is not on a central server. They're still coming out ahead even though I'm purging very frequently, and you bet I have to purge very frequently here. If I allow my opponent to get up to 5 Armor Core counters, they threaten diversion of funds on HQ, and that's a big tempo loss for me. So yeah, this really doesn't look like in my favor at all. My opponent's getting a lot more done with a click of theirs than I am getting with a click of mine. I'm basically using the basic action card at this point with a 1/3 more efficiency thanks to Jeeves, but my opponent is getting far more efficiency out of their actions every run. You know, making a run's a basic action, but they're getting a turtle counter, they're getting a bankroll trigger, a paragon trigger. So their actions are a lot more efficient than mine. They are going to win in the long term. There's nothing I can do in the short term because anything I put in the Thimble-Rig remote is bound to get checked by my opponent. Despite having a Nisei counter, I somehow managed to sneak that by somehow. My opponent is not... you know, they have so much money on the second bankroll that they can definitely afford to check my remote time and again. And with that many Armor Core counters, breaking my ice is very easy, very cheap. If anything, my code gates are going to be a liability, as Amina really just sucks a lot of money away. As you can see here, they run archives to break my DNA tracker. But yeah, and that cost me a lot of money to res, and it basically siphons away the rest of my credit pool as I lose 1 credit to them breaking Amina with Amina. Now, I guess this kind of seals off archives a bit. Maybe. I don't know. I'm going to click for 4 credits here with G's Motobioroids and pass the turn over to my opponent, who then click 1 indexings. Very smartly, taking advantage of the fact that I have only 4 credits, they can indexing pretty freely here to see a bunch of cards, but it seems like none of them are genders. They are not going to rerun that server. They're just going to get a bunch of counters on their cards. They follow up with a legwork. Nothing on R&D means that there has to be something in HQ. Actually, there's nothing. Oh, I'm kidding. There's a Nisei there, but that's the only thing in my hand. So, I lose the Nisei, but, you know, they're stuck on 6 points. I'm stuck on 4 points. Really, the next agenda is going to pretty much go in my opponent's favor, unless I can somehow, you know, stop my opponent from farming all these things, which I can't really, because as long as Naked Jeeves is out there, there's nothing that is going to stop my opponent from just farming Omakua counters. I attempt to purge here once more and get a credit out of it, but all they're gonna do on their turn is to simply run Jeeves a bunch of times to recoup those counters. So Dirty Laundry, I believe that is into the Jeeves, of course, so they're gonna get a bunch of counters as usual, get a Paragon trigger, and they're gonna run a few more times, ending the turn. Because they ran 3 or more times on my G's Motobioroids, they will get crowdfunding back from their bin. Again, just a lot of value happening on my opponent's side. Way too much to compensate for the fact that I have a Jeeves online. So there's really no incentive for my opponent to trash the Jeeves here. They're getting a lot more out of this open server than I am. So arguably, installing the Naked Jeeves was a huge mistake from me. Now, I finally decide to rest the Tapestry on R&D, but at what cost? This is a code gate that breaks for 4 and I lose 1 credit, while my opponent's at it. There's an upgrade on R&D, which I'm not resing here. What upgrade is that? I have no idea. Yeah, Ginger City Grid. Yes, that's what the upgrade is. I wanted to solidify R&D with a second Ginger Grid. So my opponent indexes into R&D, but whiffs once more. Then it seems like the agendas are all hanging at the bottom of my deck, so this is going to be a very long drawn out game. My opponent continues, discards a bunch of cards because they've overdrawn with Earthrise, and I'm going to rest the Ginger Grid here to attempt to ice up R&D sufficiently. The problem is, even when I'm laying out all these ice, it doesn't really matter, because as you can see in my credit pool, I don't have the credits to res anything meaningful at this stage, and my opponent still hasn't had any incentive to ditch their second bankroll yet, so they're still making boatloads of cash with every single run. That bankroll is almost out of space, physically out of space, to hold all my opponent's 1 credit tokens. Alright, so yeah, I'm pondering over my next move here. It seems like I've been basically checkmated, and I'm just waiting for the game to end by my opponent drawing an agenda. I'm going to attempt to draw cards here so that I can trigger my R&D Ginger City Grid, but to no avail. So instead, things get discarded, and my opponent gets the turn again. Right, so they've seen nothing on indexing, so logically the good play for them would be to wait till the indexing runs out and then expend a bunch of turning wheel counters here for the win. I apologize once again for the shaky camera footage. My camera is not anchored to properly to the floor or anything, so when the table shakes, the camera shakes with it as well. They run R&D here, and they are going to trash the Ginger Grid, which is a very good move. This prevents me from you know, getting credit economy / card draw efficiency. You know, as long as my opponent maintains their click efficiency over me, there's no reason they can't just close out the game eventually. Right, so now they're gonna just keep running, just keep running while I draw into more ice, which I install with Ginger Grid. Since it's free, why not? It's a DNA track on the outside of the Ginger Grid server. Gonna take a bunch of money with Jeeves again because I'm not drawing to my economy cards at this point, and they fire off yet another indexing, so this probably just wins them the game here. I fanned out my cards from my opponent, who says nope, no agendas, so I guess the game goes on. Yeah, this is a very painful game for the both of us. I mean, at this point I was kind of ready to concede, but I usually don't concede games, especially in the tournament setting. Firstly, because there's always an out, but more importantly because, you know, usually for your opponent, there's always the sense of satisfaction of winning a game, and I don't want to deny them that by abruptly conceding. Now, the diversion of funds here. I'm not able to keep up the purges. So if you think about it, it takes less than 2 turns to charge an armor core to 5 strength to get past the HQ and Nancy. So I have to basically purge every turn, otherwise they will have a window to break a Nancy, and that's what they did right here. Now you notice I do actually have a token on my Nisei Mark II agenda that I scored, so I could have in theory stopped the diversion of funds run, but I mean, to me at this point there's not really much point in doing so. I mean, at this point there's no way I'm going to win unless I score 7 agenda points, and there's no way I'm getting 7 agenda points without the Nisei token. So I'm just going to take the diversion to the face, and also play, my opponent, you saw the bunch of cards just splash on my table there. That was my opponent going into HQ for a big turning wheel run, thinking that agenda's in hand, but nope. I mean, I just basically showed them my hand with Celebrity Gift after that as well, confirming that there really are no agendas in hand. The remaining 4 agendas are left in my deck somewhere, that they aren't getting enough reach with the indexing. So yeah, the game just stalls at this point. With my opponent well with the front foot and me on the back foot. I find a Kakugo here. Like that's gonna help. So basically my alternate win condition at this point, a very niche win condition at that, is to stack a bunch of Kakugos on the Ginger remote and then go to push an Obo Carter behind it. That's something that my opponent can't really deal with very well, but then time was called because we've been taking so long. Even though this video has only run for about 20 minutes, I sped up this video, so we took about 40 minutes for this game. At the risk of giving my opponent a time win, I basically upgraded their time win to a win anyway, because there was no parallel universe where Alice was losing this game. She played it very well right from the start, a lot of run-based pressure, and she was going to win. It was just going to be a matter of whether she found the winning agenda sooner or later. So there really, I mean, as a non-premier event tournament, there really is no reason for me to deny Alice the win when she fought for it very well and just basically outplayed me at every turn and corner. I know this wasn't a very satisfactory game to watch because there weren't any, high impact turns or, game-changing runs, the sort of exciting things that you like to see when sitting down to watch a game of Netrunner. But I think I really wanted to showcase this game because I just wanted to show how powerful the run-based economy engine is in this current day and age. Even though Bankroll is objectively worse than Desperado, and even though Diversion of Funds is objectively worse than Count Siphon, the runners can still make very good work with these cards, especially against a corp that is unprepared to deal with such a strategy. I was relying on having Naked Jeeves out as a means to punish the runner for not having enough money to trash the expensive 5 to trash Jeeves. But my opponent flipped this on my head and said, you know what, you can have your Jeeves, I'm gonna have my superior run-based economy, and that's just gonna run over your Jeeves strategy. And true enough, it did. Yeah, by virtue of having an open server the entire game, my opponent was able to basically threaten any server anytime because they had a boatload of credits, rendering me unable to find a scoring window whatsoever. The fact that I actually managed to get 4 agenda points out was ridiculous in itself. Yeah. And even though my opponent is technically playing with a rotated identity, so you might be saying, without Andromeda, you don't have that early start needed to kickstart and snowball with your run-based engine, which is true, I'm not going to deny that, but you also have to consider that the alternatives in faction are very powerful, particularly 419, which keeps the 1 link, but also allows you to charge up that armor core that much faster and more passively. You can see this game that I basically had no money for the entire game. I would not have been able to deny 419's ability had Alice played that identity instead of Andromeda. So as far as I'm concerned, this run-based archetype is pretty strong against decks that are unprepared. My Biotech was not well prepared for AI breakers like Armor Core, certainly not equipped to deal with the massive run-based engine that my opponent had, and this was the main reason I lost. I went on to play a bunch of other criminals during Charity Gift as well, and I handily lost a lot of my games as Biotech as well. So that was a very yeah, that was the biggest mistake during my entire Charity Gift tournament. I did not deck build well enough against run-based criminal, and I suffered as a result. I underestimated the impact of crowdfunding, which gave my opponents many reasons to punish my uniced archives. Not only are they boosting their breaker and armor core, they are also getting lots of money off those crowdfundings which keep coming back from the bin. I thought they were too slow of a card to be useful, but in a game like this, where as you saw, Alice was able to drag out the game by forcing me to ice archives and then siphoning away my money with diversion of funds, in such a long drawn out game, those crowdfundings are going to keep recurring and provide massive value to the runner. So yeah, totally caught off guard by the meta there, and this is why I didn't do very well at Charity Gift, but hey, at least I had a boatload of fun, and I hope you've learned something watching this video. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more Charity Gift related content. Till next time, bye!